gonna make this garden grow. All I need is rain and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground.
This is my favorite. One of my favorite things to do every year is starting my tomato plants because I adore tomatoes. I'm sure most of us do, and I love them with basil, and I basically eat it all summer long out of the garden. So this is how I'm going to do it. You're going to watch me, and I'll explain it as I go through. So this was the first batch of tomatoes that I started, I'm going to say 2 weeks ago. And it's a really good indication of how much growth you get in 2 weeks. And you'll notice that there are not a ton of tomato plants sprouting. There's like 2 or 3 coming out of each cell. And that's because I only put 2 or 3 seeds in each cell. This is one thing that beginning self-seeders do quite often is they just think, it's such a tiny seed. There's no way that this is going to actually work. And then they put like they're sprinkling pepper. Don't do that. Just put a few. And one way that you can do that is you take a pencil and you dip the tip of your pencil in water, and then you dip that wet pencil tip into the seeds, so you just have just a few, and you're going to put them in like that. So that's one way to stop yourself from overseeding. And the other thing is once they come up and you realize that you've got 3 that have come up and you think, oh, that's fantastic, and you're going to look and you decide which one is the biggest one and the healthiest looking one, and you know what you're going to do? You're going to be really mean, and you're going to get rid of the other ones, because life is cruel. We all know this, and if they're competing with each other, you're not doing anyone a favor by having them crowded and competing. So you select that down to just 1 each per cell. And this is, I probably did this a little on the early side. You probably want to have them having a few more, these are just the 2 first baby leaves. You probably want to have them starting to have their adult leaves before you do that thinning. But that's basically what you're aiming for, okay? All right, so here we are. We have got our trays. They have been sterilized. Either you bought them straight from places like Buckerfields or Integrity, or you use a little bit of soap and bleach to just sterilize it. You want to make sure that everything's quite hygienic. And then you have your sterile seed starting mix, and you can get that same places, Integrity or Buckerfields, or other places as well. And sterile means that it has been heat treated so that it's not going to mold up on you, because you're going to be having it quite moist and quite warm, and we all know that that is breeding ground for bacteria. So I have moistened this. When it comes out of the bag, it's dry, and really dry soil sometimes resists moisture coming into it, and so you want to get it sort of damp, not wet, and sort of agitate it so that it kind of sinks into the soil, so that you've got thoroughly nice damp soil. And then you want to just put it in. And you want to get rid of any air pockets down at the bottom. So you just gently press it down. Not hard, you don't want to be compacting it, but you want to just use gentle, firm, loving hands to do that. And I'm going to do one more. Sorry, this might be a bit boring. Maybe I should have just done one, but you're going to see me do 2. Okay, and I scrape off the top. I don't want to have it all heaping. It's sort of messy. So that. Okay, good. Now, tomatoes. I save my own seeds, and I also love to have, I'm growing Nellie's tomatoes this year. So she gave me a tomato, and I went and got the seed out of it last year. So I'm going to not tip it directly in there. That's a no-no. I'm going to put them out in my hand. And here is another rule. This is the golden rule. I don't think I know of any exceptions to this rule, so you can just remember this one. You plant your seed at a depth 3 times as large as the size of the seed. So if you have a tiny, tiny seed, you just go tiny, tiny 1, tiny 2, tiny 3, and that's how deep you plant it. If it's a bigger seed, like a bean seed or a pea seed, then you're going to plant it deeper. So it's 3 times as deep as the size of the seed. And then I just go in there and I make a little divot with my finger. Everyone does this a different way. This is just the way I do it. And then I'm going to take about 3 seeds. And the reason I do 3 is there's another saying that's like, you know, one for the birds, one for the, you know, bad weather, and then one for the farmer, right? So that's the idea is you know, you don't want to be so optimistic that you're thinking every single seed is going to grow up and be awesome, but so you want to have a couple of extras, couple of spares, but you don't want to overdo it. I'm going to focus on this tray just so I don't bore you guys. Okay, and then you cover lightly. And you cover lightly, keeping in mind that planting depth I already told you about. So you barely cover these guys. You just want to just barely cover. And the reason is that there's only so much life energy that's in that little baby seed, right? And so if you take a tiny little seed and you bury it too deep, then it's got to it's got to use all of the energy reserves inside its tiny, tiny little seed to get up to the light before it can start to harness the energy of the sunlight. And so you don't want to bury it so deep, it won't make it. So that's that. And then you take up this. I just take yogurt containers and I just chop them up. And in this case I use a Sharpie because I'm not having it outside all season long. And then I just label it with Millie's Toms. And then I stick it on the edge. And there we go. And I'm going to fill up the whole tray if I want. You know, you don't have to. And then you're going to want to bottom water it. That's usually how I do it because it's too easy to sort of water in a big goosh on the top and sort of spread things around and maybe disrupt the seeds. So if you bottom water, you choose a tray without any holes in it, and then you just put about that much water in the bottom, enough that it just sucks up through the bottom. And that's a good way to water your seeds. Put this on a south-facing windowsill. It needs to have really good, strong light through the day. And you may have to move it through the house. Or you're going to choose grow lights. And the grow lights are, you know, this is a bit of an investment. So it's not a huge investment. It's very, very useful though. And what it does is it allows you to just have a really good, strong light for, you know, 12, 14 hours a day, which is what seeds really, really like at this stage. And you keep the light, you know, sort of ideally about 6 inches above the seeds. You don't want to go too high. That's not strong enough. You really want to get it down like about there. And then I just come in, I turn them on in the early morning, and I turn them off at night. So these ones are also available at Integrity, Buckerfield's probably. You can source them. They're called Sunblaster. And I can't remember how much they go for right now, to be perfectly honest, but they're very useful to have. And then you keep it at room temperature. So that's really, really all it takes to start seeds. So it's specific, but it's easy, if you know what I mean. It's sort of like baking. Like you want to follow the instructions. You want to keep things clean. You want to check on your seedlings. You want to make sure that they stay damp. And not too wet. And you want to give pretty good air circulation as well. So if you have domes, for example, you want to also let those plants get a bit of air circulation. And that's all I'm going to give you. Otherwise, it's going to be information overload. So if you really want to nerd out, there's a ton of information out there. But that's the basics to get you going. Have fun.